Good morning, Sky.
Good morning.
Where are we?
We're in Topanga, California.
Wow, I know you've been doing a lot of readings lately, and I hear you sometimes talk about what you're doing, and I have some questions because I don't really understand some of the language that you're using. So I have a few questions for you. One thing is I hear you talk about trying to hook people up to their highest vibration or something about high vibration. I was wondering if you could explain a little what you mean by that.
Yeah, so science proved in September of 2012 that everything is made up of a universal fluid. And then that fluid is put into motion by frequency. Now, everything has a certain frequency, and I think science can prove the frequency of objects. But we're also a frequency, and our frequency is set by our astrology chart, and that's based on date, time, the date, the time, and the location. So when we're born, we're kind of set up with a template, a basic template of what our life is going to be about. And then that template keeps shifting through time based on the planets and the luminaries and special points. When they're moving, it's changing that frequency, and that's how we also get growth, meaning or where we're supposed to grow at certain periods. For example, I have Pluto opposing my natal Saturn right now. So I'm going through a maturing process, and it's a maturing process for my soul, and it involves deep emotions and deep deep experiences, or for me it feels like traumatic experiences, but it's trying to jolt me out of the space I've been in so that I can be stronger and connect to my power. So when I'm doing a chart, I'm connecting to the frequency of the chart, the person's chart, and then I'm seeing, hearing, feeling what's going on. And then when I'm talking to the person, I'm explaining, I'm sharing that frequency with them. So there's this connection that happens. And then as we start talking, it's really getting that person to connect and understand the frequency. And then we're kind of having a marriage going on, and then after that, it's the happily ever after. So then it's like giving them the plan, well, how do you stay connected to this frequency? Because in life, we have abilities or behaviors that come very natural, but in this life we're here for growth. There's a meaning to why we're here, a reason. So when you understand what the North Node is, then it's like keep continuing that growing and that learning and that expanding. So it's understanding the basic template or frequency and then connecting to it and continuing on. And people can feel then eventually, once they understand what theirs is, then they can feel when they're disconnecting from it. Like I can feel when I disconnect from mine. So my North Node is in Sagittarius, 5th house of Leo. So when I'm always strong and finding solutions or being somewhat of a leader, I feel strong. But when I want to revert back to Aquarius or Gemini energy, then it's more like, well, I just want to go with the flow. I don't want to stand out. And I can feel a shift inside of me just kind of like disconnect. It's like 1 minute I'm solid in here, and when I start connecting too much to the South Node, then I'm more out here.
So can you say, this is really interesting. So your North Node is what?
Sagittarius in the 5th house of Leo.
And your south node is what?
Gemini in the 11th house of Aquarius.
And can you talk a little more, just generally, about what the south node represents in a person's chart?
hmm So their behaviors or talents that come easy, and it's where we feel the most comfortable in life. Typically, people will say, well, that's just the way I am. But really, what ends up happening is it's their south node. Yeah, it is who you are, but that's not what's going to bring you that success or that feeling of accomplishment in this life. The north node is going to feel uncomfortable at first um, because, well, whenever something is new, it's always uncomfortable, right? Until you get to know it and then understand it. Then it's like, oh, wait. Then it's like, this is great, because then everything just starts blossoming from there. And it just feels like this, it ends up being like a mind, body, soul connection. It's like the answer to a person's true happiness. So the south node, what was I saying earlier about the south node?
Well, I think you're just talking generally. I think this is really helpful. So, generally, just to summarize it, the south node is kind of like where we've been, it's our comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And the north node is where we're supposed to be kind of reaching toward.
Mm-hmm.
And where we're reaching toward, we're going to feel most fulfilled and empowered and happy when we reach toward that north node. But it's going to feel uncomfortable because it's not what's familiar.
Right, right.
So, how does the north node tie into our soul growth, or what's the north node just generically represent?
It would represent the behaviors, the attitudes, the actions that are needed for growth. Growth meaning more inner freedom, more, it's just that freedom in life, and where you feel like you've really honed in on what you're supposed to do here, where it just starts to come with ease. Because if you're constantly connected to the south node, then there's going to be stagnancy and eventually a feeling of, I feel like there's more. I think there's more I could be doing, or I'm just not happy with my life. So connecting to the north node, they just landed on my head. Was it a couple of them?
I think it was.
They're downloading me with information. So the north node, it really is just that place or the energy that it does. It brings self-empowerment. It's when it brings the control back into your world. For example, the moon. When the moon in the sky, the transiting moon, hits the north or south node, it's a great opportunity every month to know if you're connected to your north node or south node, because that's where the emotional reactions are going to come in. And people tend to live off of their emotions, right? So because we are beings of fluid, and the moon affects the tides of fluid. So when it hits the north or south node, I can see like, okay, and my reaction, emotional reaction right now, is it towards my north node or my south node? Because my north node says, I'm going to be sitting still here. I'm going to be totally, fully involved with what's going on. My south node wants to detach, and it wants to kind of just say, oh, I'm just going to let that go and move on to the next thing. But I can't do that in this life. I have to be fully present, and I have to find solutions, and then I have to make decisions. And it has to be complete and solid. My south node, Aquarius and Gemini, is just like, oh, I don't want to fuss. I don't want any drama. I'll just go to the next thing that doesn't have that. So,
So when you said the moon kind of touches on your north and south node each month, so I'm just trying to understand what you said. So when the moon is on your north node, then you would kind of try to like check in with yourself and see how you're responding to things,
yes,
to see if you're responding in a way that's consistent with the attributes of your north node or not.
yes.
And but you do the same thing when it's on your south. The moon is on your south node. You
Hmm.
kind of check in.
When
So
it conjuncts the south node, our tendencies are stronger to respond the south node way.
so it's like a current. It's
Yes,
pulling you in that direction,
yes,
and you can kind of assess whether you're going with that current or resisting it.
right. Well, you want to then make a conscious decision to aim for the north node attributes. And then that will shift the energy, it shifts the circumstances.
Oh, wow. So this is really helpful. So I guess whenever you're struggling with something in your life, you can kind of look and see. We have a little company here.
They're like all coming in now.
They're listening.
They're like, we could learn something here.
Um, so whenever we have a struggle in our life, we can kind of check in and see if we're responding in a way that's aligned with our north or south node.
Mm-hmm.
And if we see that it's south node, that's not going to be the way to respond that's most fulfilling to us.
Correct.
And so we can try to consciously shift toward responding in alignment with our north node.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like very empowering for people to kind of understand their north and south node and to be able to have that awareness of how they're responding. So if we're at a point where we're not, if we're at a point where we're responding in a way that's aligned with the south node and we want to shift it, like, how do we do that?
Learn the attributes of the north node. Every sign has the higher attributes and then the lower attributes. And the higher attributes are, like, say, the positive aspects of a sign, and the lower attributes would be, say, the lower aspects of the sign. For example, for Leo, the positive aspect would be creating positive situations, being a leader. The negative aspects would be a lot of ego and saying, well, it's got to be my way. Or yeah, being more boastful and not helping others, being the leader of others.
So how do we, once we have that awareness, how do we when we're, so that's something we can learn, those attributes.
So then you start applying them.
So how do you apply them?
So my north node is in Sagittarius and my south node is in Gemini. And I'm put in a situation where I have to make a decision because Gemini doesn't like to make decisions. There's so much going on within the mind that it's really hard to make decisions because a Gemini is always trying to see both sides of it, right? Sagittarius makes decisions. They're very decisive. They just know their truth. They know their own belief system. So for me, when I was connected to my Gemini energy, it was I never would want to speak my truth because I felt I would be judged. I was afraid to speak because I felt like I wasn't going to speak properly, like say it in the perfect way, because Gemini deals with communication. The other thing is belief system. I just believed what everybody else was doing. It's kind of like Gemini is more about the group and what everyone else is doing and kind of making everyone feel comfortable. Now, my growth in this life is Sagittarius, so it's me coming up with my own belief system. It's me speaking my truth, and I can say and I'm supposed to just speak my truth. The only thing I'm not supposed to do is speak it in anger. But it can come out all wrong. It can come out goofy. As long as I speak it, I'm fulfilling my purpose. And that's uncomfortable for me for the longest time, because the Gemini energy in me wanted to always speak completely perfectly. It was like, if I speak perfectly, then everyone will like what I say and I will fit in. But that's not my growth in this life. I have to be willing to just stand out, be different, and, just be able to stick to my truth, what I believe to be true. For North Node Sag, what I've noticed after doing a lot of readings is they're brought up in a specific type of environment where it's a very specific type of belief, typically regarding religion, because Sagittarius is spirituality and religion. So in this life, then, it's up to that person to determine what they believe to be true. Now, I don't believe in organized religion, but I do believe in a higher power. I just don't believe I have to go through an organized entity to reach that. But that doesn't mean somebody else can't be religious. My dad is a hardcore Catholic. It doesn't mean now I can't be around him. It just means we have different belief systems. And, so my growth is in understanding belief systems and cultures and how everyone is different, and that's okay. Like, there doesn't have to be judgment or...
So when you do a chart for someone, you're trying to help bring them this awareness of their North and South Node.
Yes.
And can you talk a little more about, like, I know you do readings because you talk about it often. Can you talk a little like how you prepare for the reading, when you go into the reading, what you're trying to accomplish with the person, and what the process is you go through?
Yeah, so when I first get their chart, before I even get their chart, I will ask my peeps, my spiritual teachers, what is it I need to know about this person? And then they'll let me know. They'll either let me know something that's going to be in the chart, or the main theme. They'll just show me in a vision, or I'll feel it, or I'll just be told it, I'll just hear it. From there, I'll get the chart, then I'll look at the chart, and then start putting the pieces together. And then from there, I do the reading. So I'll start off by actually giving the information from what I see in the chart. And that then is, first I'm already connected to the chart. Then it comes to me. Now I'm talking to them. So the frequency is being transferred through energy, but also through the communication. And then after I lay out the basic foundation, then I like it when the person starts giving me feedback. Well, where they understand what I said, they start giving the examples, and then we kind of start, this is when the marriage starts happening. And then that's where I say, okay, well, you're in that situation. Your North Node is in Sagittarius. Now this is what you can do to change that. If you're constantly trying to fit in and it's causing complications, like you're not speaking your truth, now this is where you need to start speaking your truth. It's like they know, like, I should just be speaking my truth, but people have fear, right? And they don't do it. But then once they understand, you know what? That's where your growth is. That's where your happiness is going to be. Then they understand, you know what? I really do need to speak my truth. I just don't do it in anger. And then there's a validation that happens. And then they're like, you know what? I am going to do it. And then they go on and they do it. And then that's when the growth starts happening. They're like, I did it and it worked.
Wow.
Yeah. So in the reading, I'm telling them where their North Node is, but I'm also giving the solutions of what to do that would be part of their highest frequency or their highest path.
So the chart really helps you in how to coach the person on how to engage their life.
Yes. And from the chart, it's a mind, body, soul experience. It tells me everything. The way they think, the way they feel, the way they feel spiritually as well. Um, so, and it also tells me, it can tell me where illnesses are, or where the tendencies to have illnesses are, and then what the solutions are as well.
Wow. So, what's an example of how you might be able to get some insight into a physical illness based on looking at the chart? How does that work?
Well, there are many ways to find out, but one of the main ways is through the North Node, South Node. So, for example, my North Node is in Sagittarius, 5th house of Leo. Sagittarius is represented by the liver, and Leo is represented by the heart. And in this life, those were my two concerns all the time. I always had the liver, which the emotions are agitation, anger, frustration, impatience. And in the heart is giving and receiving love. So those were my issues later in life. Like, my childhood up until my 20s, I realized now I was very in tune with my North Node. But when a traumatic experience happened, there was a separation. And traumatic experiences cause separation of the spirit body from the physical body. And then everything just kind of goes into craziness. And then from that experience, I've always said, well, why did that happen? Like, how did that happen? How did that dysfunction start to happen from that experience? And then that was my journey of understanding spirituality, emotions, feelings, the mental aspect, physical body, yeah.
Wow. So how do you, if you get insight into physical ailments, then how do you determine what the solutions are?
There's always many solutions. Some of them are through action. Some are through food. For example, with my liver, I had to consciously be aware of my thought process. I had to slow down, and because the liver has to do with impatience, I had to learn patience. I had to slow down each time I got frustrated or angry and just be calm for a second and really just feel, where am I feeling it in my physical body, and let that kind of release. The other thing is I did start drinking hot water with lemon, which helps detox the liver. The other thing would be, for Sagittarius, it would be being in nature and meditating. So meditating, there's a million ways to meditate, but I just simply call it sitting in the silence, which I had actually gotten from a medium, John Holland. And I just shut everything out, go within, and just sit in that quietness. And from that, it just started releasing the rest of it. The rest of it meaning the unnecessary parts that were causing the frustration or anger. It also helped me open up my mental state, my mental body. Because Gemini energy, which is the opposite of Sagittarius, likes to think a lot. And then that tends to affect the stomach. And I did have a lot of problems with my stomach because I was always overthinking. So once I stopped, I calmed down my mental body and got it quiet and was able to just sit inside and connect to my spirit body, then it started shifting everything else.
Huh. That is really amazing. Thanks very much for sharing that, Sky.
Thank you.